When it rains, it pours. That's what they say, anyway. For me, the rain brings a calming presence that relaxes me. But to others, it brings memories of horrifying events. These subscribers sent in some truly creepy stories that don't fit in with my usual video topics. So the Rainy Day series has become the home for all things creepy that don't fit the channel. If you have a story that you'd like to share in a future video, be sure to send it in to the website or the email that you can find in the description down below. I would love to share your story with everyone here in the swamp. Let's get into these truly creepy stories that will freak you out on a rainy day. I work as a manager for a well-known video game retail store in a small area outside of a major city in Texas. I have worked there for about 6 months now, and I have a book full of weird, creepy guys that come in. But in the end, all of them are harmless. That is, until about a week ago. My store only has about 4 employees most of the year. My store leader, assistant store leader, and another guy who is the same position as I am, but hasn't been there as long. Since we have such a small staff, I usually end up working my shifts during the week by myself. I usually love morning shifts because it feels safer and less weirdos come in. This particular day was pretty normal. The mail guy brought in our deliveries, and maybe 1 or 2 people came in to browse. Then, a tall guy about my age came in. For reference, I am 5'2", so this guy towered over me. He went straight to the shelf and picked up a Harley Quinn beanie, and then headed straight to my register. I asked him if this was all he needed today, and he said yes. I asked if he had an account with us, and he said he needed to look up the number, and then said, "Are you just gonna stare at me while I do this?" It took me aback because I tried not to laugh as it being weird humor or something. He kept making very jerkish comments while I rang him up. I don't remember what he said next, but he asked my name. I didn't think anything of it, and kept finishing his transaction. He paid off his pre-order for the new Red Dead game, and his beanie, and started talking to me about what all comes on with the edition that he ordered. He then again said my name like he wanted me to hear what he had said, and that's when I realized I didn't even have my name tag on. Also to add, I have never seen this guy before, and I am pretty good at remembering our customers, especially our regulars. We kept talking about the game in which he said my name an odd amount of times until I finally said, "How do you know my name?" He then replied very quickly, You just look like a tailor." This is not my real name, but for the story's sake, my name is Taylor. I said, "What? I don't have my name tag on. We have never met before." He said, "I've never met you before in my life. Well, have a good day, Taylor." And then he quickly left. I was so taken back and kinda creeped out, so I sent a text to my store group chat to see if anyone knew him, and none of them did. Later that same day, I had just put it in the back of my head and was clearing out the area where we keep items that customers put on hold when I see the same Harley Quinn beanie with the guy's name on it. He had tried to buy it days earlier, but our machine was broken. I asked my boss about it, and he said the guy barely comes in and hadn't been in our store in a really long time. This freaked me out even more, as it solidified that I did not know him. Also, this may just be a weird coincidence, but I'm a huge Harley Quinn fan. I even have a tattoo of it, and it just seems so creepy that he bought that the day this happened. I had another encounter with him, and this happened about 2 days ago now. We have to call people when we are having a midnight launch for a game, and since he pre-ordered the new Red Dead Redemption game, I had to call him. My boss told me if I was uncomfortable then he would do it, but I told him I could manage it. I dialed the number, praying it would go to voicemail. He answers. I tell him the store is calling to let him know that we are having a midnight launch, and how he could pick up his game. This sounds weird, but I can hear him smiling and small laugh before he says, "Thank you." It doesn't seem that creepy over text, but the way he said this gave me a chill. He hung up, and I just sat there trying to think of how he knew my name, or if I had met him before. I know I haven't met him. I'm a pretty paranoid person in general, so I try to keep these things to myself and I tell myself I have nothing to worry about. As a side note, I have major anxiety and PTSD from an incident that happened when I was younger. This makes me more alert to the way people act and talk, especially men. This may not seem that weird to someone reading this, but the way this man talked to me went from being so rude to being so cocky and creepy, like he knew he had power over me. This is something that happened to me when I was in my previous house a while back. It all started one night when me and my family returned home from bowling, and my father said that he left the back door unlocked by mistake. But luckily, it appeared as if no one had broken into our house. How wrong we were. Every third night, I'd hear this tapping noise in the floorboards under the carpet ever so slightly. I usually ignored it as I thought it was just a pipe from the boiler vibrating against the floorboard or something. When it came to me playing my video games, I'd find my controllers out of place with the game stack shuffled up. I was kind of a geek that assigns his games from A to Z. But I shook it off, at least it took me away from gaming. Sometime, I'd get these whispers of my name in a very low pitch which I thought was my brother playing tricks on me, so I kept replying, "Go to bed, you crap stain." One night, my father went into my room and said, "Don't tell me this tapping isn't keeping you awake." I replied back with a nod, and so we unscrewed the floorboards, and then we saw something you'd never, ever want to see in your life. It was a homeless man, with bloody bones of an unidentifiable dead animal. He kept staring at my dad with a toothless grin, and charged at him with a rusty knife. My dad was trained in the ways of Krav Maga and disarmed the homeless man and knocked him down. In the meanwhile, I called the police and explained the situation. A police cruiser came in under 10 minutes and came and arrested the homeless man. A message came through the post saying that they arrested the man, and he was wanted for repeated home entries and the murder of an elderly woman. It said that he was jailed for life and maximum secure prison. I am lucky to still be alive to tell this story. It's definitely one of the creepiest things that have ever happened to me, if not the creepiest, and I hope no one ever has to experience something like this. Back around 2000, we saved a life. Follow back to a couple of years before when I met a cop at 3:15 a.m., he was cool and let me go. I was working in a warehouse 45 minutes away and getting into college. I took on a job about 45 minutes away from home at a food distribution warehouse. The pay was good and the hours were fun, ending at 2:30 a.m. or later. Living in a very rural area, I'd safely blow the stop sign. A cop was watching the next day and flicked on the emergency lights around 3:30, when there was no one else around. Simply gave me a couple of names of those who screwed me over, then he let me go. Long night. Second time around, I went out with a friend, smoked a little doob on a back road, and got pulled by the same cop. I showed him the roach after recognizing him, and it was all good. A few months later, a couple of friends and I went out to the fairgrounds, a very rural area. We smoked a large doobie. We made the decision to take the long way around, cool out, and enjoy the time. We left the parking lot, then just down the road was some debris, in which I tried to stop, but I ended up running over it. So I turned around and walked out to remove the debris so no one else would run over it. Then my friend said, "Dude, there's someone down there." I nearly crapped my pants. He was nearly 12 feet in this ditch, covered in blood, holding a dead flashlight. Upon inspection, there was a 12-pound sledgehammer sitting right beside the accelerator and serving gear through the windshield, just inches from his head. It appeared that he had traveled through the ditch about 200 feet before crashing into 2 trees. We pulled him out of the ditch and called 911. There was no way around. If I didn't decide to go the other way, he may have died. It was cold. Guess what? That same cop showed up and told him exactly what we were doing. The next day, my friend at the incident had diabetic shock, right beside the guy we pulled out of the ditch. This happened a few years ago when I was about 23. I live walking distance of the mall and don't drive, so I walk to and from the mall a lot. One night, I left the mall, and right outside was a man who had just been in a fight. He was yelling at someone and said that he was going to get his son to kill the man. I'm pretty sure he was very drunk, and not the fun kind of drunk, the I better not upset him or he'll probably hurt me kind of drunk. He approached me and continued talking about how he was going to get his son to kill the man he was fighting with. He followed me down the street while telling me delusional stories about he was the richest man in the world. I am not convinced the son of he spoke exists. When we got to his house, he invited me in for a beer. I probably should have said no, but I feared he would keep following me. I wanted to be rid of him, so I figured if I just had one beer and went on, he might leave me alone. So, and what probably went against all better judgment, I went right inside his house. The inside of his house was very sketchy. There was a mattress in the middle of the living room floor, and there was a coffee table with a dozen empty beer bottles and some weed on it. I'm pretty sure the man was drunk, high, and mentally ill. I watched him open a beer for me, so I'm fairly certain it wasn't poisoned. He also offered me weed, but I declined, since I've never smoked weed and don't know how it would affect me. Beer, I figured, was safe enough considering I normally drink vodka. My plan was to finish one beer and get out of there. The man asked me if I had a boyfriend. I truthfully said no, but immediately realized the smart thing would have been to pretend that I had a tough and very jealous boyfriend. I came to my senses and made up that I had a protective brother waiting for me at home. The man offered to be my boyfriend. I declined, claiming something about how my brother wouldn't like that. At one point, the man said he was going upstairs to get something and for me to wait. At that point, I was certain I was about to be murdered. I did not finish my beer. I laid it down and insisted I had to leave immediately before my brother got worried. I got out as fast as I could, ran home, and thanked God that I live in a building with a door that locks automatically. I never interacted with that man again. I'm not entirely sure which house he lived in. I sometimes see him walking down the street talking to himself. At one point he came close and I got scared, but he didn't seem to notice me and went to talking to himself. Now, when walking home at night, I talk to my mom on the phone so that it's clear that someone knows where I am, and hopefully, no creeps try to make a move on me. This only happened yesterday, when me and my friend were just hanging out as we normally do at my house. We were really bored, so we decided to take a calm walk around my neighborhood. Or so we thought. So let me tell you about my block. There is a hospital nearby, and my neighborhood has a history of drug and alcohol related incidents, but those don't happen very often. Nevertheless, it was kind of dodgy. So, me and my friend, for privacy reasons we'll call her N, were talking, messing around, and such for the entire walk, having a blast in each other's company, until we were about to reach my house. Now, we were close to the end of the walk. Let me set the scene for you. We had just turned a corner down our street, with houses on each side, a parkland on the other side, and a 2-lane road separating them. My house is right next to the parkland. N and I were walking down the footpath on the side of the parkland towards my house, in silence, just taking in the views, I guess. I don't know. But when we were about 50 meters from my house, I heard a footstep around 15 meters away from me and N. Only one. I casually turned around, expecting a young teenager, an older person, or something like that, because that's usually who we see walking along these footpaths in my area. But what I saw will be burned into the back of my head for years to come. 15 meters away from us, there was this off-looking man. He looked young, I'd say mid-20s. He had a skinny figure and dull, but fierce-looking eyes. He wore a dark hoodie and jeans, and he was looking at me with this unsettling look in his eyes. But the absolute worst part of this was that the man was limping very aggressively, walking very quickly towards me and N. Almost unnatural. It looked like he was possessed, and he was grinning at me with the most creepiest smile I've ever seen in my life. It was twisted. His head was cocked to the side, and the man's teeth were so yellow I could see it from 15 meters away. He looked psychotic, and he looked like he wanted to harm us, in the most brutal way imaginable. I whipped around and told N to start quickly walking back to my house, because running might make the guy angry and run after us. We don't know if he's high or drunk or whatnot. But I was too panicky. I didn't even mention why we should haul ass back home. N turned around and almost screamed, and stared in shock. I've never in my life seen someone pull that kind of face before. N turned and almost screamed and ran as fast as she could back to my house. I followed her. I turned around and the man was about 9 or 10 meters away from us. He was moving way quicker than we were, with that disturbed, broken limp of his. If it didn't look unnatural or scary to begin with, it sure did now. We are two young teenage girls, and if both of us fought against this man, I don't think we would win, even if he was on the skinnier side and injured. We sped up, and it was a chase. No running, but very close enough. He was chasing with this fast demonic limp, and we tried to speed up as fast as we could without actually running. We were trying to keep that now 10-meter gap between us. We managed to get home safely, and I peeked through my window by myself as N was in shock for a bit. The man had slowed down, but it was still limping, but he crossed over to the other side of the road. For what reasons, I'll never know. He went out of sight and closed the curtains. Still shaking, after all of this stuff, Ann and I went back into the kitchen to grab some water. My kitchen window kind of overlooks a bit of the parkland, and we have a decent view of it. We both saw the man slink back into the parkland, and never saw him after that. Afterwards, I thought about the whole incident, and probably got even more unsettled. I only heard one footstep, no pattern, nothing, just a thump on the ground by a sneaker, and that's it. It then hit me that the man was trying to attack Ann and I, and was probably trying to sneak up on us. It gives me anxiety knowing that if I didn't hear that single footstep or didn't turn around, we could have been in some serious situation. That man could have had a knife or a decent type of weapon in his hoodie's pocket. Who knows what could have happened? This story took place my sophomore year of high school. I was 15 and a girl, young for my grade. It was Wednesday in the winter. I joined the honor society at my school. Besides meeting and talking about how to help my community, we also had to meet at 7:20 a.m., which was 25 minutes before school. Since I wasn't a morning person, missing more time to sleep was always frustrating. That's why I was always late, which on this day, I was running late as usual. Being 15, I couldn't drive myself to school, so I had to have my grandma do it, who lives with my mother and I. She took me to school, since, at this time, my mother would be in the bathroom putting on makeup before work. My grandma opened the garage with a button on the garage wall. Both my grandma and I got into her car, which was parked in the garage, of course. Once closing the door, she would pull out into the driveway. Now, she looked back towards the front windshield to pull out to the right towards the street to our cul-de-sac. and I screamed to stop and she quickly slammed on the brakes. There was a man, probably about 6 feet tall, dirty blonde looking hair, wearing all black. He was only illuminated by the headlights since our winter mornings was pitch black here, and today it was raining. I noticed something in his hand. Being the observant person I was, I thought I saw a black handle. The man didn't look at us, explain himself or anything. He just kind of slipped away and disappeared into the darkness. I live in a neighborhood where we all know each other and watch out for each other. We all own about 1 acre of yard each. Recently, my neighbors have been having work done around their house with taking down some trees and fixing up their house. So I didn't want to jump to conclusions right away. So my grandma, with her heart of gold, continued driving as we discussed what had just happened. She assumed that he was just a worker. I knew he wasn't though. I told her I thought he had a knife and she brushed it off, saying maybe it was a worker holding a dustpan or a shovel. He could have just been using the yard as a shortcut. But no, something told me that she was very wrong about that assumption. So I began trying to text my mother, but no texts were sending. Nothing was going through. I texted, locked the door, but when it went through, she didn't understand. She was questioning me and asking why. At this point, I quickly called her, explaining the situation and yelling to her to block the door. She did, and not a second later, he opened our screen door and tried to open the door's handle. When it didn't work, he tried to kick the door down. My mother then called the police. I don't know how quickly the police arrived. We live in a small town, so I assumed the response time was pretty fast. When the police arrived, she told them what happened and they wrote up a report. Later that morning, the man was found a couple roads down. He tried to get into some other houses too when he ended up getting into a house and a man had chased him out with a shotgun. He was caught and arrested, found with a large butcher knife. Although this isn't an extreme story, it holds a lot of weight with me, and there's a lot of what ifs in it. What if I hadn't been late? What if I hadn't gotten a hold of my mom? And the biggest one of all, what if I wasn't late and my grandma asked him for help? I'm now a junior in high school and it's been about a year, but the effects of this encounter still haunt me. I'm still afraid to be home alone. I will always double check, even triple check all the locks, and listen intently to the sounds of my house when trying to sleep. If I hear something, I'll go check it out. He's made me paranoid, but I guess my fears are kind of rational at the end of the day. Who expects their home to be the site of a creep encounter? This story happened to me long ago when I was 10 years old. This story happened in a small town in the leafy suburbs north of New York City in Westchester County. It didn't happen at my house, but at the house of one of my good friends at the time, about a walking block away from where I lived. This is one of those towns in Westchester where there are huge suburban houses set among oak and maple trees. It was a safe neighborhood where I knew the owners of each house by name. The houses were generally quite large, with multiple floors and several bedrooms. The house where this scary story takes place was extra large. It was not the shining hotel large, but it was a large colonial house with 5 bedrooms on the 2nd level. The family living there had 5 children ranging from 10 to the upper teenage years at the time. The night that this happened on was a dark, cold night. The parents were out with dinner plans that evening, and I was there visiting my friend Byron, who was also 10, and his other brother Jacob, who was 12. It was just the 3 of us in one large house that night during October. I knew this family quite well, so I felt very at home in their home. We were just goofing around that night, playing some games and watching TV. 3 kids in a large empty house, what could go wrong? So this is where the night becomes creepy. The 3 of us were in the kitchen with the lights on bright. It was around 11:30 at night, so it was late but not super late. The phone rang, and Jacob, acting as the head of the household at 12 years old, answered, "Hello." We then saw Jacob get a peculiar look on his face and hesitantly said, "Just a minute," and then did something a bit odd. He rested the phone on the chair. This was one of those wall phones from the 1990s. I didn't think people still used those in 2018. In any case, he put the phone down and just left it and walked upstairs. I remember thinking it was a strange thing to do, but it could have some reasonable explanation. I looked at Byron, and he also looked curious, and kind of had a WTF type of expression on his face. We were quiet for a few seconds, and both our facial expressions showed signs that we thought this was peculiar and odd. In a few moments, Jacob is going to be running down the stairs in a panic, screaming for us all to immediately get out of the house. But before we get to that part, here's what happened upstairs. Jacob climbed the stairs and went into his parents' room, where there is a phone on the tabletop. This is one of those old corded phones, where you pick up the receiver and hold it to your ear. Not exactly an iPhone 10, and there was no way to know who is calling. Jacob picked up the phone and said, "Okay, I'm upstairs, what's up?" A few moments went by with dead silence, and Jacob asked, "Hello?" The voice came. It was calm but cold. "Jacob, there's a bomb inside your house, and it's going to blow up any second now." Click. The other end hung up. He dropped the phone and felt panic and rush through his body. He ran out of the bedroom, down the stairs, and started screaming to get out of the house. "There's a bomb in the house! There's a bomb in the house!" We saw Jacob at the bottom of the stairs running, and he did not waste any time, heading straight for the foyer, and outside, and down the stone path that leads away from the house and out to the street. Byron and I ran outside with confused fury also. Jacob stopped running when he arrived at the side of the corner of the street on the sidewalk. We looked across the street at this huge house, looking very eerie on the dark night. The house had several lights on, and the front door was open, and it was empty. There was no one around. The neighborhood was still and quiet. It was just us, 3 kids, the oldest a 12-year-old, standing there on a cold October night at almost midnight, scared out of our wits and waiting for the house to burst into fire. I was feeling chills through my body and chills on my skin from the dark, cold air. Our jackets were inside, and we could just go get them so easily, but thought the house could blow up at any second. Jacob explained what had happened on the phone. He said that he thought it was Uncle Jerry, but now didn't think it was his Uncle Jerry. It was bizarre that the caller knew he answered on the ground floor and told him to go upstairs. How could he know this? We thought that maybe he told Jacob to go upstairs so that he wouldn't have enough time to get out of the house before the possible explosion. We stood there. We waited, and we were scared, and we were cold. We thought the large, boxy, empty, illuminated house on this dark night would soon be in flames. That there was a chance that it would be in flames. But it never blew up. But we were still afraid to go inside because maybe it would blow up then. Eventually we went to the neighbor's house. The father there didn't seem as scared as we were, but he did call the police. The police searched through the house, and Byron and Jacob's parents also arrived home. I see the whole thing was some kind of practical joke, a prank call or something. We never found out who made the phone call, and Jacob to this day still has no idea who could have been. He still says at first he thought it was a friendly call from their uncle. There were a few pranksters in the neighborhood. Actually, we were amongst the biggest pranksters in the neighborhood. Still doesn't explain how the call knew where Jacob was at the time that he called. Who would do a prank that is so sinister to a few vulnerable kids home alone on such a night? I was about 12 years old. I was out trick-or-treating with my younger brother and my mom. My mom was following us but letting us go ahead of her just a little bit, about half the length of a street of distance between us. We get to a block where there aren't any houses lit up with lights or decorations. so it's very dark when we hear a man calling kids over to him. He was overweight, probably around 30 years old with long hair, wearing a black t-shirt, a black baseball cap, and jeans. I remember getting serious creepy vibes from him, but shrugging it off since Halloween is creepy anyways. He wasn't standing in front of a house, just on the sidewalk. He wasn't telling anyone Happy Halloween or anything at all. He just stood there silently the entire time. He had a brown paper bag and was handing out what we presumed to be candy. So we approached him and opened our bags and he dropped some in. He must have run out quickly because after serving a small group of kids after us, he left quietly. When we got home, we dumped all of our candy out onto the floor and noticed that we had somehow received some type of homemade candy wrapped in a black electrical tape. I opened one and it was clear, melted looking, and sticking to the tape. It looked so odd that we threw it away. After a few weeks later, it had come out in the news that parents had been reporting their kids getting sick after eating homemade candy laced with GHB from Halloween. They didn't know who gave it to them, but I think I do. If only I knew the guy's face or the guy's name. Well. It seems we've hit the end of these stories for this video. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed these stories, hit that like button as it helps me out a ton. Be sure to comment down below letting me know which story was your favorite. If you're new to the swamp, why not subscribe and turn on notifications, as I upload videos almost every single day on all things creepy and anomalous. If you have a story you'd like to share on a future video, be sure to send it in to swampdweller.net or the email that you can find in the description down below. I'd love to share your story. I have some merch that you can also check out. It's in the links in the description below as well. I'd love to see you guys wearing some Swamp Dweller shirts, and I'll see you guys soon with another creepy video.